So today my talk is about, it's about my handbook, which is a bit of a silly title really for, I think every designer, I'm a designer, every designer goes through their career and they pick up ways of doing things along the way. So that's basically what this handbook is. It's my way of doing things. These are like my design principles. These are things that I start to sail my ship by. They keep me on track. So I keep referring back to them time and time again. And they've changed over the years. You know, right now in my career, I used to run a little design company. I now work for Monotype as design director. So they kind of change, you know, you change environment and they change with you. So hopefully they're going to be useful. They're kind of practical. But first of all, I'm going to talk about what you guys call faucets and what I call taps. So I have got a growing collection of photographs of taps. It's a bit of a thing that I'm kind of embarrassed to talk about, but so this tap is, the temperature is on the right, and this controls the water flow, right? It's a little bit odd. We've all seen these, where you put your hands in and magic happens. First of all, soap, and then water, and then air. Now, if, like me, I have ghost hands, so this doesn't work. I wave them around. I'm the guy at the supermarket or at the airport going like this along every tab, right? There's this one. This is a personal favorite of mine. This, again, was ghost hands. So I was kind of waving them around underneath and nothing was happening. And then this happened and my arms got soaked. Taps should not require instructions, is my point here, right? So this comes to my first principle, my first thing in my handbook, which is the thinginess of the thing. So when I was in university, I studied to be a typographic designer after failing at trying to be a forensic scientist. Bit of a change. So I was in my third year at university, and everybody, you know, we write a dissertation, which is like 10,000 words long, and I was dreading it because I didn't like writing. And I was like, what am I going to write about? I have no idea. So I went to see the kind of art design history lecturer. And I had this idea, right, I'm gonna write about postmodern graphic design and, you know, David Carson and Emigrate. It was all the thing, you know, post-grunge stuff. And you could see the look on her face. She was like every single design student that said exactly the same thing that day. So she's like, well, no, maybe you should go away and have a think about it. And I was like, what does that mean? Does that mean that was a rubbish idea? Probably. So I went away and I had a think about it. And in the end, I wrote my dissertation on Gibsonian cyborg culture, which again was like you know, I was just reading Mona Lisa Overdrive at the time, and I thought it was a pretty cool book. So I was like, right, it was not a good decision. But off the back of that was a growing interest in this thing called the internet. And a growing interest into the possibilities of it. And I was the only person on the course who wrote a dissertation like that, but also as part of it, designed a website. And now this website, and you know, with the final major project of the year, I also had a website. And part of my final major project for the year, I did a website on Elvis. I don't like Elvis. I don't know why I dig Elvis. It was pink, that I remember. I should dig it out. It'll be somewhere, horrific code, capital letters, or deprecated elements, all the rest. But what that process of learning the web, you know, everyone else, every other designer was making pretty things and holding them up and getting their friends to take photographs of them, right? Everybody wanted to make something beautiful, and I made something really ugly. But it didn't cost me anything. Now, every time somebody printed something at university, it was a big A2 dye sublimation printer, and it would spit out a big print, and it would cost £10. So as a student, I was living for a week on £10. If I made a typo, I didn't eat, right? It's high stakes. So, but the web, it was free. All I had to do was publish. And that gets me onto the thinginess of the thing of the web. And that's what, in essence, I think it boils down to. Sure, you've got lots of other stuff, progressive enhancements, hyperlinks, collaboration, the very foundations of how the web was born. But really, the barriers aren't there compared to other traditional media. We can just publish, and that's brilliant. That is the thinginess of the thing. So whenever I find myself straying around, getting all discombobulated with the web and projects, I just remind myself how brilliant it is that we don't have to order steel from India and get it shipped and have supply lines and all of this stuff that could go wrong. We don't. We just publish it, and if it's wrong, we publish it again and it's right. And that is awesome. The other thing about the internet, which is great, is this. I'll read this. Well, you can probably see, if you want an image of London, imagine a terrapin riding a dead fox in Regent's Canal forever. This is what's brilliant about the internet, is you can just publish. That is actually a terrapin on a dead fox. You can just publish this stuff, right? And cats. So this had 3,500 retweets or something crazy. So, thinginess of the thing. My next point is, so in the 1950s, and you know, we've probably seen this on those of you who've watched Mad Men, or those of you who've worked in advertising, right? Those of you who are in the room who are designers, even developers, you know, all of us really, we've been sold a lie since the 50s and 60s. Commercial design in the 50s and 60s was something that, particularly in advertising, was something that happened free, right? Because the ad agencies were making money elsewhere. So they made money on their media spend, and then they just, you know, creative was free. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is that because it was free, it had to be done quickly, because otherwise they'd waste loads of money and time. So they'd bake in this linear process, and you can have changes at points A, B, and C, right? That is a lie that we were sold then, and clients are continuing along that lie, and it's kind of entrenched. There's this, one of the partners of IDEO has got this great, this great model of how they work, and they kind of, you know, they sell it into clients. And thankfully, we've come around to this way of thinking now on the web. Certainly, you know, I think the reality is we don't really do it, but we say we do, which is there's this sine wave of iterating and testing, right? Where, you know, you make something, you put it in front of users, you test it, you change it, you test it, you change it. That's very hard to do commercially because no one's going to really write a blank check, right? So, but in-house, you can do that, even though there are other pressures. But I think there's another sine wave along there, which is the feeling of something being great and then awful and then great and awful. And those map to, I'm in my little designer bubble, I'm making great things, and then I put it in front of somebody and they can't use it. And I'm like, oh, woe is me. So making things is a really messy, squiggly, horrible business. This is my lounge last year. So I was having so there are kind of random photos of my house in here. It's just a state of I'm kind of doing up my house. So, but there is a point. This was so I was having a new fireplace, and it's a really old cottage. And there's a guy called Di Cook. He's the Welshest Welsh name of the Welshest Welsh man you've ever seen in your life. He's perfectly round, and he's got huge hands. He's perfectly designed for picking up rocks. So he's a stonemason, and this is what he does for a living. And he makes an absolute mess wherever he goes. Just mess follows him around. And I mean, I'm kind of dreadful with as soon as I get any kind of tradesman in and stuff. I'm just kind of like a little kid. I stand there watching them. They're like, "What can I do for you?" I'm like, "Nothing. Do you want a cup of tea?" I'm just watching what you're doing. This is what design is like, right? I think design isn't points A, B, and C, signing off stuff. Design is a big, fat, squiggly mess until something kind of all right pops out the end of it. And then, sorry, that sounds so depressing, doesn't it? But, you know, it's kind of true. All right, so making things is messy. I did run a publishing company for a little while, a little publishing company, which is still going, 5 Simple Steps. And what we did there was, well, I wrote a book, and I published it myself because I didn't want publishers making an ugly book from my words. So it's kind of selfish. But then other people wanted me to publish books, which was nice, so we did. And we published lots over the years. But, God, did we screw up. Weekly, daily, we made an absolute hash of it continually, the whole time. And one of the principles I keep coming back to in my handbook is, just Frank Shamaro, for those of you who know him, he did a wonderful talk at the Do Lectures called The Long, Hard, Stupid Way. And there is real benefit in doing things the long, hard, stupid way, because you learn way more than if you just went out and got a Shopify license, right? No, we built our own thing. We did our own fulfillment, which was ridiculous. We hired a little company in Derbyshire in England, and when it snowed really badly and Andy Clark's book was released, it snowed in the yard about this much, and they wouldn't get the truck out. And we're like, what do you mean you won't get the truck out? He's like, can't do it. And that was it. So the whole book was delayed 2 weeks because some guy, no, not doing it. Oh, so it was ridiculous. But there's benefit in that. I like to think I learned something along the way. So the long, hard, stupid way. I thank Frank for that. It's a lovely phrase to make you feel better about not giving up on something. So, there's a really great book called Creativity, Inc. I don't know if you've read it. It's from the other guy from Pixar. He must hate being called that, but he is. He's not Steve Jobs, and he's not John Lasseter. He's the other guy. I can't even remember his name. I have to look. Ed Catmull, right? So he talks, it's a really good book. He talks about one of the kind of founding sort of management techniques and principles that he has there is paying attention, right? So as I ran a studio, I had a team of designers, and now I'm a design director, and I have a slightly larger team of designers who work with me. One of the things that I try to do every day is to just be mindful about what is going on around me and the people around me, right? Because that's really what it boils down to. I was talking to Paul, who sat here, yesterday, and Jen Simmons, about what it is where I am with design. And it has a lot more to do these days with the people and the environment in which I'm doing the work. Because if those people are rubbish at what they do, or if they're idiots, or if the environment is not conducive for good work to happen, then good work won't happen. You can be the best designer in the world and push pixels around until you create the most beautiful thing, but if the environment's not right, in which that work can be taken and made real, then you're totally wasting your time. So I spend a lot of my time paying attention. And that means attending meetings, it means speaking to people on the phone, it means doing all of this stuff that maybe you wouldn't consider design. But I think it is. It's part of the picture, because if you don't do that, you're not designing really. You're making pretty things, and they won't get made. So, kind of noticing these seeds and ideas that float by in the day. People have a million ideas every day. If you're in a team, things will crop up all over the time. So it's paying attention to how they do that and when, right? So a lot of us work remotely. It's the tools and mechanisms that we have in place to get those ideas, right? You have to grab them and nurture them, because if you don't, nothing will happen. So that's that. All right, this is a sign from from Lucian, who was 6, and this was in a hotel lobby in New York. And I like to think that these are 5 rules that I could live my life by. Building Lego, drinking chocolate milk, playing with my friends, not talking on the phone too much. What 6-year-old talks on the phone all the time? And draw every day, which is kind of nice, that last one especially. All right, this one's really important. So a little while ago, I worked with the Drupal community. Who works with Drupal? A few of you. Who is in the Drupal community? One person. But that's all right. I was in the Drupal community. I'm not really anymore, through no fault of my own. So Drupal is an open source content management system. The way they get things done is they talk, right, largely. And they do that in issue queues, they call them. It's just basically a big forum, and ideas go in there and they get kicked around until there's something else, and then they come out at the end. It's kind of like the House of Lords in the UK. Things get beaten up and kicked around, and completely something different comes out. But the process of talking and how things happen, I mean, that is how things happen. And that is how things happen with design too, right? If you're in your own little designer cupboard and you're not talking to clients, colleagues, users, again, I don't think you're really doing design. There's a big anti-meeting backlash, right? We've seen it with, 37 Signals book. We've seen it with, everyone's like, I don't do meetings. We don't have any structure. There's no management. There's no this thing. There's no that thing. We just work and we make brilliant things. Bullshit, frankly. No, you don't. Because meetings is the work. As I was saying, right? Meetings, talking to people and getting things done in the environment in which work happens is as important as beautiful typography. It's probably even more important, because without that other stuff, this beautiful typography is just created in a void. It just doesn't go anywhere, right? So I spend a lot of my time doing this to colleagues, to clients, to management, and always be talking. And another thing about this, which is what we're all really good at in here, and in the web industry, is that we do talk about our work. We have blogs, we have Twitter, we do great stuff. And I don't want that to go away. We're actually kind of unique. A lot of other design industries don't do that. They're all scared of each other, and they're all competitive, and they don't collaborate. You go to an architecture conference, and it will be some guy stood up here talking about his work. And we did this building, and we designed this building, and this building we designed like this. There's none of this. There's no sharing. There's no getting better at what we do. And that's ace. We shouldn't change that. Right. It's amazing how many people don't do this. Absolutely amazing. People are weird, right? People are just so odd. And we don't get enough contact with them. It boggles my mind how user research is quite often relegated as a project expense. It's a line item on a proposal. User research, 10 grand? No chance. I just want to carry on and build this thing in a void and just hope it's okay at the end. I was once, when I first started work in London, I worked, this is many years ago now, 1999. And we designed this project for a paper merchant site, portal. Turns out people trade paper. Well, at least they did then, which was a bit weird. And we had to design an app that did it, and people traded paper. So, 1999, there was a lot of money flying around. So we did user testing because it was a line item, that was like 10 grand or whatever. And we got some participants in a room, and we tested them. The first guy that we tested, I don't know, he was in his 60s, and he sat down, and we're all behind like mirrored glass, I sat there waiting, and he put his mouse on the screen and started moving it around. Right, so there was that reaction in the room. Ha ha, idiot! There was just, this stupid man. And then, well, that was only very quickly until we all felt dreadful. And then there was this moment of, we've got bigger problems, right? This audience is like this, and we're designing this big app, and they can't use computers. So, of course, the site failed. They all lost loads of money. We didn't well, no, some people did lose their jobs. So the lesson of that is to just bake this in from the beginning. Don't make it optional. I mean, since, 2009, when I worked in my studio, this was not optional. When clients that we work with, we were like, we are going to test stuff. We are going to do research. And it's all just part of the cost. They tried to remove it. We're like, well, no. Because, why would you? So, and it's really easy. This is the thing as well, is that usability testing, those two words, we shouldn't call it that because it implies academia and rigor and all this really scary academic stuff that just puts people off. And it's too steep a learning curve. Just put stuff in front of people, watch them use it, gather some feedback, spot the trends in the feedback, and you've got something that you can work with. And it's not hard, you know, and it's not that expensive. Give them like a 20 quid Amazon voucher. They love that. Just only £20 or dollars or whatever. They're like, thanks. So, you know, it doesn't cost a lot. All right, I told you there'd be photographs of my house. So this was just shifting tack completely. This is in my near my kitchen, right? And it's a 4-gang light switch. And I wanted to replace it, a sort of plastic one that the electrician put in, and it was horrible. He didn't even ask me, he just put it in. I was like, I can't have that. So I went away and bought a new one and put this in. Now, before I replaced it, I took a photograph to see where the wires went. See, what a good little trick. Thing is, I put the wires back in exactly like this, and it didn't work. So now when I go into my utility, I turn one light switch on and nothing happens, and I have to go to the other side of the room and press another light switch, at which point the light comes on. Then, if I want to turn it off, I have to go into another room. My point with this is that know your limits, web designers, right? Get an expert in if you don't know how to do something, because just sometimes it's better, especially if your life is on the line, right? So, all right, now I'm getting a little tired of this phrase, MVP, because I'm not sure it means what a lot of people think it means. And I get a little hooked up on semantics and meaning of words because they're really important in organizations, right? Because absolute clarity of what things mean is how things change or get changed. We have to be really, really clear. But anyway, so I mentioned material cost, right? We don't have to order steel. Pixels don't cost anything. They're freely available. So it doesn't have to be perfect. Thinginess of the thing, we can just publish. So this is where the minimum viable product and really minimal viable product is something that I actually, everyone gets really bored about me going on about MVPs at work because I'm like, no, what is it really? What is it really? I keep hammering on to try and get to the nub of what minimum means, because that's the problem with this phrase. It's not viable product. Oh, that's fine. It's the minimal bit. I don't know what my point is. My point is just to be mindful of it, really. Is to, this is ridiculous. So, I keep saying, a lot of things are the thing with me right now at the moment, and content is the thing, because without it, nothing happens. And I am still, my mind boggles. So we did work with Al Jazeera for about 3 years. They are a broadcaster, and they produce lots of content, right? And that's fine, but they also wanted to kind of ignore the content problem a little bit. And other organizations too we've worked with, you'll crack on with the design and the development, and you'll just put the content to one side. Oh, we'll get to that. I'm sure you've all heard that. Oh, yeah, we'll come to that. So show me this interaction. Let's have a look at the prototype. We'll get to the content. Let's not worry about it. And you just build this big content mountain to climb at the end of a project, right? And that's where everything just grinds to a halt because things have to go through legal and all of that kind of stuff. So content is really everyone's problem. Little tip that I did, and I urge you to do it, is just make it up. It drives clients absolutely insane when you get their facts wrong. They hate it, and they're going, oh, that's not right, we'll have to change that. I was like, oh yeah, great, okay, sorry about that. So, don't hide from content. Make it up when you put it in your prototypes. Even loads of, lots of it. Put recipes was a good one that I did. Intermingle recipes with real content, because then people actually have to read it. And that works well too. This one's really simple. It's the kind of principle behind this is be clear. I have loads of Post-it notes, kind of, we all do. whoever makes Post-it notes, 3M, they must make a fortune out of this industry. They are stuck all over the place, and this one I found on my wall next to my Mac, and I have no idea what that means. I have no idea at all. And there's a lesson there, right? Which is, this may be some kind of artifact of a discussion, and that's great. But unless you put a little note as to what it is, I'm like, I have no idea what that squiggle means. So be clear, document things. Ooh, this one's contentious. So, when is it useful to design by numbers? Right? I think this differs from industry to industry. But when is it important to A/B test? When is it important to apply UX techniques to arrive at an optimal solution for better conversion and all the rest of it? Well, yeah, it is useful sometimes, but not all times, right? Because this is also useful. Instinct, not data, right? I cannot, they're different parts of your brain, I think. They're different parts of my brain. I can't approach a problem. Frankly, things like A/B tests, I have no patience for that kind of stuff. It's like, what else requires patience? Fishing, actually, that's a bad example because I quite like fishing. But, something that takes a long time. I have no patience for setting up A/B tests and thinking, that's the famous shades of blue thing. That's not how you arrive at something beautiful, right? I think that for the longest time, humankind, has been trying to quantify beauty, right? That's where things like canons of page construction come from. It's where a lot of theories of Greek architecture come from. All of this kind of stuff is, and there's good reason for doing that. There's good reason, because if you can quantify it, you can replicate it. And if you can replicate it, you can manufacture it, right? And Apple do that really well. But at the heart of things like Apple, I don't want to hold a thing to Apple because everyone gets sick of that. But what they do is that they have good instinct. At least they did. Sorry, that sounded a bit bitchy. It wasn't meant to be. I don't like the watch. It's horrible. But, so yeah, a spark of inspiration, I think, is much more likely to get something beautiful at the end of it than testing whether or not this button should have rounded corners or square corners or flat or rounded or whatever. That stuff, frankly, is just boring. This is a table in a chip shop, fish and chip shop in Tenby in South Wales. So I went there in January with for my wife's birthday, with the kids. And Tenby is a holiday town, so I'd never been there in winter. And we were the only people there. So kind of walking around this weird ghost town. And we found a fish and chip shop that was open. And we got to the table, and this was on the table. And I took a photograph of it because it made me smile. And that's all. So I think there's something nice about delightful, mundane things. And if we can make the most mundane thing delightful whilst doing it carefully, then we do better design, right? We can get it horrendously wrong. Like, if you're a bank and you try and all be cute in your language, it's not great. Don't make that delightful. Don't make paying your mortgage delightful. But make, little delight in mundane things. So look after the basics. So this is about a couple of things. Is there any martial artists in the room? Anybody done martial arts? No? Well, I wanted to. Okay. So I did martial arts for years as a kid and into kind of adulthood. I don't do it anymore. I'm too rickety and old now. I'm a cyclist instead. I only have to move my legs for cycling. So what's my point? My point is, in martial arts, you go through like your first 10 years of martial arts and you amass techniques, right? You're like a sponge. Oh, I can do this thing, and I can jump in the air and spin around, and I can kick someone in the face. And you amass all these different techniques, and then eventually what happens is that you get to kind of, 10 years in, black belt level, and those techniques disappear. and you start focusing in on one or two things that work really, really well. And I'm finding the same thing is happening to me in my career, certainly with design. I find early on in my career I was amassing all the things, like a big sponge, right? Like a little kid. Like, teach me this, I want to do this thing, and oh, look at this typeface, and oh. And over time, I was like, I just can't take it anymore, so I'm going to pick a few. So I have a few favorite typefaces that work really, really hard. Things like Georgia is still a brilliant, brilliant typeface. Verdana, actually, at certain sizes, is brilliant typeface. When it gets big, it gets ugly, but it was never really designed to be big. So, but once you pick those few things, you can really start looking deeply at them, and you begin to understand them and begin to apply them in different ways. So there's a little rant about kind of web typography and stuff, but we got really good on the web at typography. Now, I'm not talking about picking typefaces. That's not typography. We got really good at understanding, way better than the majority of our kind of print cousins, right? We got really good at understanding hierarchy, about understanding, applying different type weights. We only had a handful and a handful of weights, right? But we used them. We used Georgia in a myriad of different ways, and it looked different, right? And that's good typographic design. So my worry about, opening these floodgates of type is that we forget that, right? And it comes back to this basics, is to just focus in on those basics again. Spend time away from all the newfangled stuff and get back to just typesetting an article really, 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 really well. So, the rope-a-dope. This is Muhammad Ali, and in 1974, I have to look at my notes because there's quite a lot to remember here. In 1974, they fought in the Rumble in the Jungle. And Ali had lost, and he came back. He's getting on a bit. He's getting old. And Foreman was young and hungry and strong, and they had the most incredible battle. And what happened throughout it is that Muhammad Ali was against the ropes, and he had his hands up here, and Foreman was just hitting him with everything he has. And then in the later rounds, and all Ali was doing was just soaking it up and soaking it up and soaking it up. And in the later rounds, he knocked him out because he tired him out. So I look at this, particularly, going into complex big organizations. Now I'm in-house at a complex big organization, is that sometimes people just want to beat you up verbally or politically. Maybe not really, that wouldn't be very good. But they want to let it out on you. Sometimes you're an easy target, especially if you're a consultant. Sometimes that can happen. And it's our job to just sit there on the ropes and take it for a bit. Because you'll win in the end. They just need to let off steam. And the amount of times I've had that in projects, because what we do when you go into these big complicated, responsive design, actually, we're at a really tough time now with web design, because it was once kind of understood and now it's a big mess. So we go into organizations where they're trying to get their heads around this big mess, and responsive design touches so many facets of a business that clients don't really understand it will do. Things like content, even organizational structure. We did some work with CERN, and they thought we were redesigning their website, and we ended up in 3 years reorganizing their communications department. That wasn't our job. It just kind of happened. We should have charged more. But it was and there were times in that project where we just had to do the rope-a-dope. It was a big mess. We were breaking more eggs than we were making omelets. And the client was like going, oh, it's such a big mess. What are we going to do? That was fine. He was just letting off steam. This is another advertising one. So again, Mad Men. But it's so well researched. So if anybody's ever worked in advertising, it's kind of spot on, even till today. But there's one thing that advertising does get right that we don't get right on the web, I don't think, in professional services anyway, is that in advertising, when you win an ad client, you don't win a project, you win an account. And an account is for a year, right? It's time-based, and it's usually a year, sometimes 3, up to 3 years. So it's high value, there's a lot at stake. This is why ad agencies put so much into things like pitches and all of that to actually get the work, because it's not a project. It's not over in 12 weeks for 30 grand. It's for a year or 3 for $1, $2, $6 million. But more importantly than the money, what it is a commitment, right? Ad agencies and clients, there's a commitment there. It's like, we will work with you for 1 year, and we're going to learn your business. And the client is, we're going to work with you for 1 year, and we're going to tell you about our business and our problems. The problem when we condense that down into a project is that it's just too quick. You don't have time. You're in and out of the door. Even halfway through a project, if you're running a studio, you're looking ahead. You're not now. You're like, and we need more work into the pipeline, right? So I think that's one thing that we can take from that. Kevin Spacey applied this to, of course, to getting House of Cards on Netflix. So what they did there, they didn't do a pilot, right? So the way that TV gets made here is that you have a pilot, and based on the success, numbers, not instinct, of the pilot, is that the season is commissioned, right? Well, there's a lot to do in a pilot. In 40 minutes, you've got to establish the plot, the characters, you've got to set up some cliffhanger, there's a love triangle, there's a car chase, there's, some aliens. That all has to happen in 40 minutes, enough for everyone to go, I can't wait to watch the next episode. And Kevin Spacey was like, we're not going to do that, because we needed time for the story to play out. And I think that's what we need when we work on commercial projects on the web. We need a commitment, we need an account, not a project. And the most successful work that I did over the past 6-7 years has been commitments. We worked with ESPN for the whole time I was there. I ran the company. CERN, we worked for CERN for 3 years. Al Jazeera, we worked with them for 3 years. And that was an ongoing commitment. It's like, we're going to solve your problems. We didn't even know the problems with CERN in 9 months. We couldn't. There was too much to do. So that was that one. This one is, digital things age differently. This is about patina. So there's a wonderful phrase in Chinese cooking called wok hei. And wok hei means breath of wok. And what that means is that the patina in the wok imparts its flavor onto the food. And it does that through time, right? Now, some things get better with age, right? These jeans apparently do, that I'm wearing. I'm not supposed to wash these for 6 months. So if I'm a bit stinky when you come and talk to me later, that's why. Yeah, sorry, that's so gross. No, they're not stinky. I haven't worn them that much. But they get better over age, right? One thing's nice. I've got another pair of these jeans, which I did wear for about 8 months. They were pretty smelly. So I washed them, and what happens is it takes all the indigo, the dye out, and you see where you've spent the most time. So I've got 2 little kids, so it was just white on my knees, and it was just blue everywhere else. I look ridiculous. So, and then some things look dreadful when they age, right? Food, stuff, fruit and things. It rots. It's just awful. And it's just a question to myself when I'm working on a project is, how is this going to age, right? What happens when more data goes in this? So many designers design for the perfect state of things. We've seen this with the Apple Watch, right? And those stupid 4 pictures of people with names with 3 letters, Bob, Jim. It's like, what about Sebastian? So that's one thing as well, is like, let's just break stuff early on in the design process by seeing how it will age. Put data in, break it, put more data in. The British cycling team won a load of medals at the Olympics, which was great. And Sky cycling team aren't doing so good right now, but they have been. They're almost, dominant. I'm a cyclist, so, this interests me. The thing about why they're so successful is that they applied, it's actually kind of a management technique that they applied to their team called Marginal Gains. So when a cyclist takes drugs to race, they get about a 17 to 20% advantage on those that don't. That's a phenomenal, that's why all the cyclists took drugs. Is because if you didn't, you'd be an hour back on the road, right? You'd just be way back. So, but Dave Brailsford, who runs the teams, he was like, we're going to go clean. And everyone's like, ha ha, no, you won't. So what he did was he applied this marginal gains technique, which was looking across the breadth of every part of a cyclist's life, across the whole team, and apply little tiny changes everywhere, aggregate together to make 17 to 20%. So the cyclists take their own pillows with them. There's little things like that. They watch every bit of their diet, a multitude of things. And I think we can do better work by adopting that. It's like looking across the entirety of a project and not making big changes. Big changes are really hard to make because management, because money, because of time, of this thing and that thing. But little changes you can do without telling anybody, right? You can just go, yeah, I'll just tweak this little bit of code, or I'll just do this thing, I'll just do that. And it's just better work because of it. This is my daughter. Sorry, I was supposed to give you a little nod, and I didn't. Nah, it's not working. Oh, it's okay.
Oh dear, it's quiet. That's quiet, mate.
Oi, mate, me hear you.
Twinkle little star, how I wonder what you are.
I'm not going to bore it. That goes on for ages. I'm not going to bore you. She just repeats the same verse over and over and over. So I'm not sure if you noticed in that clip. So what happened was, so you know Furbies? You got, well, yeah, they're relatively new for us. So it was a bit of a surprise when we got one for the girls for Christmas, because it started all like nice, like, ooh, you know, Furby, all nice, and then it turned evil. Because she wasn't giving it enough cuddles or whatever. I don't know. I didn't really understand it. But we came in one day and it was like, she's like... But what that clip showed, I don't know if you heard it, but it farted. Now, I don't know whether I think that's acceptable or not. And my point here is that I'm getting older. And things are happening to... in consumer electronics and the way that people consume content and toys that fart, is that I'm getting further and further away from those people. And it goes back to this thing of watching real people, right? Is that the further I get away, the more important it is to watch those people, because I have no real kind of empathy. I'm just like, that's not acceptable. That toy's going in the bin. So that's that. I don't think it's acceptable. It's just kind of getting older generally, I think. This is kind of what happens. You turn a bit grumpy. And my last point, my last thing, is I actually have a picture of this in the studio of Bob Ross. Now, of course, Bob Ross was just happy, wasn't he? Right? Whatever he did was just great, and he'd make little mistakes, and he'd turn them into raccoons, and, you know, it didn't bother him, but he was just so happy. Bob Ross is the reason I'm a designer today, because I want to be that happy when till the day I die. Thank you very much.